Should India change its caste system? Government leaders in New Delhi are under pressure following violent protests by the Jat farming community. Why are they demanding more opportunities? And what are the roots of the caste system? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. Thousands of soldiers have been deployed to Haryana state in northern India, where protesters have been killed in riots. The Jat, a traditionally rural community of farmers, is demanding more government jobs and places in state-run universities. They complain of discrimination because of India's caste system, not because they're from a lower caste, but from a higher one. The Jats say they're being shut out because of a quota system that gives more opportunities to Indians from lower castes. From Haryana, Jaspal reports.
There have been more protests despite a curfew in the presence of thousands of troops on the ground given shoot-on-sight orders. The rampage continued with protesters burning buildings, torching vehicles, and we're also hearing incidents of looting in shops and of ATM cash machines. Travel also has been severely disrupted, not just in Haryana, but also in neighbouring states, as Haryana is a key gateway to the northern states of India. Any train that passes through Delhi to the north has to pass through Haryana. About 1,000 trains have been cancelled.
We are facing a lot of trouble while commuting. The train services have all stopped. There are blockades by protesters everywhere. Even the buses and taxi services refuse to take us to places where the protesters are.
Several highways like this link Haryana with Delhi, so it is inevitable that the effects of the protest would be felt in the capital. Not just with travel disruptions, but also water shortages. Delhi gets more than half of its water supply from Haryana, and the main source, the Munaf Canal, has been taken over and shut down by protesters. Now, there are still curfews imposed in several towns and districts in Haryana, but Jat leaders we spoke to said they are going to carry on with their campaign until they get reservation status.
Oh, there are more than 3,000 castes in India. These are 6 of the most important. The Brahmin are the highest of all. They're traditionally teachers or priests. The Kshatriya usually are from the military class. Next are the Vaishyas, mainly merchants, traders and artisans. The Shudra are servants of those belonging to the 3 castes I've just mentioned. The Adivasi are regarded as the indigenous people of India. Most live in rural areas. The Dalit are the lowest of all castes in India and the most disadvantaged. They normally work as cleaners. For more on this, I'm joined by our guests. In New Delhi, Jaspal Singh, Professor of Political Science at Indira Gandhi National Open University. And also from New Delhi is Dipankar Gupta, sociologist and author of Interrogating Caste, Understanding Hierarchy and Difference in Indian Society. Welcome to you both. Let's begin with Jaspal Singh. What really lies behind the protests by the Jat community, do you believe?
It is the intra-Jat politics and the change in the agrarian society. Change in the agrarian society in the sense, a lot of new groups have emerged in the rural society in Haryana and in the surrounding areas. The new social groups are ambitious political people, entrepreneurs groups, and a large number of middle class. So they are now competing for their political space in the North Indian politics, and especially in Haryana. And it is intra-Jat politics in the sense that we can divide Jats of Haryana into 4 kind of groups. One, those who are followers of the legacy of Devilal. Another, followers of the legacy of Congress Party. Third, the followers of legacy of Charan Singh. And fourth, the new group, the followers of the Hindutva or BJP ideology.
Well, let me go to Dipankar Gupta. Apologies for interrupting, Jaspal, but I just want to go to Dipankar Gupta, picking up on something that you mentioned there. the political nature of this, the political roots of what we are seeing among the Jat, for example. Would you agree?
Well, yes, broadly I'd agree, but I'd like to add a few more points. That is this, that rural society is no longer what it used to be. Land holdings have shrunk tremendously. At the same time, literacy has gone up, and there are all kinds of people with all kinds of papers saying we have a diploma in this and a degree in that, which really doesn't mean anything on the ground. And thirdly, the levels of urbanization in India has also spiked. In fact, it's much higher than the usual the figures we get in the census, because rural India, there's a lot of non-agrarian activities happening. For which reason, we find, as Jaspal said about the Hindu politics entering the villages, we find Hindu politics much more strident in Jat areas in contemporary times than they used to be in the late 1980s and early 90s when I was studying that region quite carefully. And I think the reason simply is that agrarian societies are no longer able to summon up the kind of devotion, ambition that used to be the case earlier. People want to leave the village in a hurry. There's nowhere to go, so they think urban areas are the best place for them to find refuge. They look for jobs in the urban sector, which is basically government jobs in the public sector. And these jobs are very scarce. Over the last 30 years or so, the number hasn't budged from 29 million or thereabouts. So jobs are not being created.
Right.
And, all of that, you could add them up together, and you get a perfect mix, and for all kinds of disturbances.
Let's just bring in our third guest, who's now joining us via Skype from Nottingham, Diego Majorano. He's a specialist on poverty and inequality in India. He's a Leverhulme Trust Fellow at the University of Nottingham. Diego Majorano, thank you very much indeed for joining us. The issue we're discussing is what precisely is lying behind these actions by the Jat community? Are they predominantly political in nature in the end?
In my view, it's a combination of the declining status of agriculture, both in terms of social status and economic status. So Indian agriculture has been performing quite badly in the last couple of decades. So it's not as important as it used to be as a source of living. And on the other hand, the Indian economy has been experiencing what economists call jobless growth, by which they mean very high rates of economic growth, but job generation, especially in the formal sector, has been very slow. To give you just one number, between 2004 and 2009, only 25 million jobs were created in the non-agricultural sector, as against the need of 17 million jobs per year. So even though the latest data are a little bit better, it still means that the youth cannot find jobs. And this, of course, causes frustration that is sometimes expressed in this way. But it's also important to recognize the declining status of agriculture. It's certainly not a coincidence that all the communities that are agitating throughout India, the Patidars in Gujarat, the Jats in Haryana, and also the Kapus in Andhra Pradesh, they are all traditionally farming communities. So I think it's an important point to take into account.
Jaspal Singh, I mean, here we're hearing an outline, the decline in the farming industry, and the communities, it is being argued, seizing on the whole issue of India's affirmative action policy to actually try and get greater rights and get greater access to the workplace. Would that be the correct interpretation?
Actually, the changing rural economy, the result of it is the changing nature of the farming community as well. And it's not only farming community, all the communities are undergoing significant changes. So the net result of these changes is the nature of politics also, nature of issues which are emerging in Indian politics. One is politics of recognition. This is a very new phenomenon which has emerged in past 2 decades. And another is politics of redistributive justice. So far as this politics of recognition is concerned, it has both cultural aspect and some aspect of the social justice as well. So this rise of demands for the reservation and a lot of cultural cultural demands are related to politics of recognition. So affirmative action is, in fact, can be seen in the light of the changes which are taking place now in our society. But the state has its own limitations. It cannot provide beyond a limit, and under certain circumstances, these issues are raised. Demands are raised, mobilization is taken up to a particular level, and then the decision-making forces intervene, and there is some kind of agreement. And in this, certain people are accommodated. The people who are raising these demands, they are accommodated, and then the process move on. And then after some time, these issues come up again. Sometimes it's redistributive justice, sometimes affirmative action, sometimes it's mobilization of the farmers, sometimes it's regional demands. So I think these issues keep coming up one by one, depending on the requirement of the politicians in particular particular political circumstances.
Well, let me go to Dipankar Gupta. Amidst all of this argument and this debate, the Supreme Court has been very clear on the issue. It's consistently refused to declare a community like the Jats as an other backward class, arguing that social backwardness should be a prime determinant in deciding who will benefit from the affirmative action policy. Is the Supreme Court likely to hold its ground on that particular issue?
Look, let's be very clear. The people who are agitating are not those who are really the most depressed. In fact, traditionally, they have been the oppressing classes, oppressing the scheduled castes in India, and the Jats and the Gujars and the Kapus and so on and so forth. They are not the depressed people. Therefore, to ask for reservation is not a way of upward mobility, rather it is a way of asserting the political authority. Now, reservations here in this particular case is very different from the reservations of Ambedkar, which was for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, because in that case it was to give some social and political assets to people who had nothing. In this case, those who have rural assets want to transfer that along with the political power to urban assets, and therefore it's a big difference. Third, this is not affirmative action at all. Affirmative action, American style, is very different. Here it is all about quotas. And the business of quotas with the backward classes got a further fillip because of the Mandal Commission, when the Mandal Commission had three categories: social backwardness, economic backwardness, and educational backwardness. Social backwardness, there were four criteria. One is, do you work on land? Of course, every Jat will say, I work on land. Does your wife help you? Yes, of course, my wife helps me. What do other castes think of you? No caste thinks well of any other caste. And the fourth is the killer. The fourth one says, the fourth criteria says that do your children get married before the legal age? If they do, they get 3 points for it. So they get 3 points on 4 criteria, and that's 12. And all you need is 11 to be considered backward. It's a sham. It's a complete sham.
Let's go to Diego Majorano, who I saw nodding in agreement with you there. I mean, the argument there that groups like the Jats are actually in no way the backward class that they claim to be, that they are, we hear that argument, oppressors of the past and of lower castes. Is that your view as well?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. There is a lot of evidence that, these people are farming communities who own land, and there is a widespread evidence from anthropologists and political scientists that these are those who oppress the agricultural laborers, who are in most cases lower caste or Dalits. So I couldn't agree more. So I will also would like to say that it was particularly evident in Gujarat, where the Patidars were agitating in the last months of last year, that it wasn't so much an issue of reservations, even though they were, on the surface, it was an issue of reservation, but the Patidars have not even approached the Backward Class Commission to be inserted in the list of OBCs. So I think it's more what they are asking is a scrapping of the quota system rather than their inclusion in the reservation system. This was very clear for the Patidars. It's not so clear for the Jats, who have been approaching the BC quota, but by no means these are the most depressed people in India.
Yes, well, Jaspal Singh, we've heard from the Jat community, we've heard what their call is. They are saying grant us rights under the action policy or scrap the entire system. Is there the suggestion that this is actually an action aimed at getting the entire system scrapped completely? What's your view?
Because Jats have never said that they are social and educationally backward classes. If you, I mean, now they are saying, because in the context of present agitation, they are saying that they are also backward. But if you hear some of the arguments of their leaders earlier, they were saying we are not backward, we are not oppressed in any sense, so are not the Yadwas and Gujars. When you give reservation to those castes which are just like us, why discriminate against us? So in that sense, a reservation for them is a result of the competitive politics with the equals. And when they are raising this issue with the equals, then we have to also look at the sections among the Jat communities who are leading. And not only among Jats, my observation shows that among different communities, a section has emerged which has nothing to do with their traditional communities. If you look at their profile, their occupational profiles, they may be, they say that they belong to a particular community. But if you look at, they are in fact big businessmen, they are entrepreneurs, they are having nexus with the power structure. So it's in fact a competition among the power elites, and who in fact mobilize people on their social issues, which can be sometimes emotional issues. So these issues, in fact, literally have nothing to do with the benefit of the society, I mean, of the community, because we have to look at this agitation in terms of the agitation on several other issues. They keep raising one or the other issues one by one, and it's, in my opinion, it's in fact elite which is a new group which is completely detached from their traditional communities.
Well, let's just take a look, if I may, Jaspal, at the wider issue and go to Dipankar Gupta on it. The reservation system, once again to repeat, grants the underprivileged community government jobs and education quotas as a way of, in fact, levelling a playing field, as it could be described. But this type of action that we are seeing now raises the debate once again, has the reservation system worked, and should it be kept in place? What's your view?
I think the reservation system for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes has done rather well, and it should be kept in place, except there's a certain amount of tweaking required, no doubt. It cannot be left the way it is, but the principle of it is fine, and the practice of it is by and large fine. When it comes to the OBC, as I mentioned to you earlier, it is not the same logic at work. The rationale is very different. In the case of reservation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, the rationale really was that at the end of the day, we will not have the caste system in the public place. It will be extirpated. In the case of Mandal reservations, it is not about extirpating caste, but it's about representing caste. And that's where the difference lies. Over and above that, people who are getting reservations in the Mandal system is not in terms of equality of opportunities, which was the issue with the scheduled caste reservations, but equality of results. They want results right away, overnight. And they want to shift their rural assets to urban assets, and to get OBC status under these circumstances is actually a show of power. So if you're a powerful community, you'll get OBC status, and we are going to show it to you. That is the logic of the current agitation.
Well, let's just, for our viewers, make clear, when you make reference to OBC, that's the reference to other backward class, which some communities are arguing that they should get that particular distinction in terms of the benefits that they will receive from the government.
Yeah, they're basically agrarian castes.
Diego Majorano, we hear very clearly there from Dipankar Gupta the way in which it could be argued that some are gaming the system in a way, and in so doing undercutting what many would have argued is a very noble system that has worked fairly well in over the last years.
Yes. Well, I agree by and large. Certainly the system has worked well for the Dalits and the scheduled tribes population. But it should be noted that the upper caste still dominates public institutions in India to a very significant extent. So there was a study a few years ago by Ashish Gupta and co-authors that said that in the city of Allahabad in North India, 100% of office holder of the press club, or 89% of the hospital doctors, or 77% of NGO representatives were upper caste. So I think the reservation system, even for OBC, although I agree that it has been gained, as you say, it's still important to ensure the representation of all communities in India among India's public institutions.
And yet, Jaspal Singh, if we can go to Jaspal Singh on this particular issue, despite this, despite the implementation of the system, we have those facts there created by Diego indicating that the caste system is very strongly alive, that it resists attempts by central government to remove it or to level the playing fields. It does appear that the whole caste system is so deeply embedded within the social fabric that legislation or law or government action cannot in the end eradicate it completely. Would you agree?
See, it again depends on the social groups which are making the demands. The social groups which are powerful enough, as Professor Gupta had said, Professor Gupta said that these are the powerful groups which have their demands accepted. So in case of reservation also, these are the powerful caste groups which have their demands accepted. Some agreement in favor of their demands is made. But with regard to the caste, its significance now is declining in the public space so far as social relations are concerned. But then it is playing its quite important role in political mobilization. So certain people have called that caste has now become a secular institution in the sense that in the public space you don't bother about each other's caste, but when it comes to flaunting your clout, then you use the caste. And so that way caste system is disappearing in the traditional sense of the term, but it's coming up as a means of mobilization of different social groups. And the social group or the caste which has resources at its command, these resources could be their number, these resources could be economic strength on their part, or the resources could be even sometimes criminal strength on their part.
Well,
so
let me just go very quickly, if I may, Jaspal, let me go very quickly to Dipankar Gupta on this particular issue just before we end the particular show, and that is, does the caste system resist attempts to alleviate it or change it?
I think we should pay very close attention to what Jaspal just said. The caste system as a system doesn't function anymore, because in the village now you can't order people to do things for you. There's a great degree of mobility in occupation and also spatially. Second, what exists is caste identity, and caste identity is different from the caste system. And the caste identity is often used, sometimes successfully, but very often unsuccessfully, for political mobilization. When it comes to scheduled caste reservations, may I tell you that today, as we speak, the number of scheduled caste people in the government sector at the higher reaches, not the lower ones, higher reaches, is almost 10%. In about few years, maybe a decade, it'll be 15%, which is their proportion of the population.
Well, at that particular point, I'm afraid, apologies for interrupting yet again, Dipankar Gupta. Your points are very well taken, very well made. But at that point, my thanks to our guests, Jaspal Singh, Dipankar Gupta, and Diego Majorano.
Thanks.
And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mike Hanna, and the whole team here, goodbye for now.